respect the journey, and don't be disappointed if the journey has nothing to do with what you majored in. This is Craig Robinson, and you're listening to Dreams in Drive.
Hey, this is Raina Campbell, your Chief Dream Driver, and welcome to the No Parking Podcast, where through conversations and discussions with creators like yourself, we'll find interesting approaches to help you take your dreams out of park, put them in drive, and ride towards success. Hey, Dream Drivers, welcome to episode 221 of the Dreams in Drive podcast. And I am super excited for you all to hear from this week's guest, Craig Robinson. Now, Craig is a fellow Princeton alum. He's class of 1983, and he's also the older brother of the iconic Michelle Obama, class of 1985. Currently, Craig serves as the vice president of player development and G League operations for the NBA's New York Knicks. And this episode is special because over the past few months, I got to know Craig because I was part of the steering committee for Princeton's Black Alumni Conference Thrive, and he was the chair of the steering committee, and we served on a few subcommittees together. So when I asked him to be on the show, he was super, super excited to do it. We said yes. We made it happen. We did this live at Princeton's podcast studio, so I hope as you all are listening, you realize just how genuine, how real, how thoughtful Craig is. And I definitely felt the energy as we were doing this interview. You guys are going to hear Craig reflect on his life. We're going to talk about his personal dream driving journey, some of the risk he took in his career, and why he made the decision to go from banking, where he was making a lot of money, to going back to his true passion, which was sports and basketball. We're also going to talk about the major lessons he's learned from the important people in his life, as well as tips for other dream drivers who are trying to find their way in their life and their careers. If you enjoy this episode, I encourage you guys to share it on social. You can find Craig on Instagram at CraigMalRob. That's CraigMalRob. And of course, you can find us. We're across the board on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Dreams in Drive. And you can also use the hashtag Dreams in Drive when sharing as well. If you want to support the show, I get a lot of questions on ways that you all can support. Just go to dreamsindrive.com/donate. All right, so let's get into this interview. I hope you guys enjoy. Hello, Craig. Welcome to this episode of Dreams in Drive. I'm so excited to be here in person interviewing you at Princeton University.
Raina, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be interviewed by you. And what does this make me, number 219?
200 and something, because by the time this episode airs later this month, there'll be more episodes.
All right. Congratulations.
I've done a lot of interviews over these past 3.5 years.
Well, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So what made you say yes? Like, what was the reason why, I was able to convince Mr. Craig Robinson to do an interview with Raina Campbell?
Well, aside from the fact that we have gotten to know each other being on the steering committee for Thrive, celebrating and empowering Black alumni at Princeton, it is the fact that you're a Princeton grad, a young Black woman trying to get her grind on.
Hustling.
and I like your voice, so I think you will make me sound better.
Really?
Yes.
You know what's funny? My voice is something that I've always had this love-hate relationship with because I feel like it's very unique. I know it's unique, but people are always like, how old are you when I'm talking to them on the phone?
It's interesting. You have a high-pitched voice, but it has some smoky undertones to it too, so you might have I'm not a sound guy.
I can't sing. That's the one thing. I feel like I probably have a cool singing voice if I knew how to sing. I think you would have a cool singing voice. Yeah. So those were the reasons why I said yes. So let's go back to Chicago, all right? Let's go back to your early childhood days, 6-7-year-old Craig.
Right.
What was inspiring you back then? What were the dreams that you had?
Well, I like most 6 or 7-year-olds who grew up in the 60s, who were in this late 60s, early 70s probably then. There wasn't much on television. Mm-hmm. My parents didn't go to college. My dad was a laborer for the city of Chicago, so a blue-collar job that was shift work. My mom was a stay-at-home mom who later was a secretary, so neither one of them finished college. And my sport of choice back then was baseball. Oh. And I was a South Side Chicago Cubs fan, which is rare because the Cubs are on the North Side. Mm-hmm. But they were on TV when I got home from school. And the White Sox, which were a Southside team, came on too late. It was past my bedtime. So I became a Cubs fan.
Okay.
And my favorite player played first base for the Cubs. His name was Ernie Banks.
Okay.
And at that point in time, I wanted to be the next great Ernie Banks. But my parents, who were really my inspiration, because of their, unconditional love and their thoughtfulness, always encouraged us to do our very best, no matter what we did. They didn't care what the grades were. They just wanted you to do your best.
Us being you and your sister, right? Just for people who don't know, your sister is Michelle Obama.
Yes, my sister is the famous Michelle, the iconic Michelle Obama, as I say these days. But, we were afforded a lot of leeway to try a lot of different things.
Okay.
And to do your best. So my parents really inspired me, and while I didn't know what I wanted to be other than a baseball player, I knew I could, if I worked hard enough and put my mind to it, I could achieve whatever I wanted.
So how did that dream evolve over time as you turned into adolescence, high school? Because you don't look like a baseball player to me right now, right? So how did the dream change, or did it change? Let me not put words in your head.
No. You're right, but I was a really good baseball player, even though I was tall and skinny and looked like a basketball player. But then I started playing basketball and fell in love with that game. But before I turned into like an adolescent basketball player, I thought I was going to be a race car driver. So there's a theme here. I wanted to be a successful sportsman because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have video games. The video games were just starting when I was coming along. So everything we did was outside, and we were playing whatever sport was in season we played. Competition was big in our family. So I thought I'd be a race car driver, but then I grew too tall to be a race car driver. And then I started playing basketball. And I thought I wanted to be a professional basketball player. But as I sort of moved along that spectrum, I began to realize that it was really hard to do that. So I wanted to make sure I had something substantial to fall back on. So I was always a good student. Again, getting back to my parents emphasizing just do your best. And you marry do your best with being competitive. You end up being good at school just from a competitive standpoint. And I really thought that I was going to make it into the NBA, and I got close
before you went to college. So you were gonna go from high school to the NBA?
No, they didn't do that back then.
Okay,
there were only one or two guys who did that ever back then.
All
no,
right.
I knew I was going to go to college and play for 4 years. That was the plan, to get my degree, and then hopefully try out for the pros.
Did your parents, I come from a Caribbean family, and so to them it's like be a doctor, lawyer, something. Even me being a podcaster now, media, they're kind of like, is this for real? Were your parents supportive of this athletic dream of yours?
Absolutely.
Okay. Absolutely.
My dad took me from the South Side over to the West Side to play basketball, 4 times a week. My mom came to my games. So they supported whatever we were interested in. And, Raina, you're making me think back a little bit. They never said, I want you to be this. They never said, I want you to be a doctor. I want you to be a lawyer. They just said, figure out what it is you like doing and be good at it. When I look back on that advice, and I know we're going to get to advice and keys and things that sort of help direct you in your life, that was one of those things that I didn't know how fortunate I was to have parents who unconditionally said, you can do whatever you want. Just be really good at it.
That's really
don't be a criminal. Don't be a criminal.
Your mom's not doing time with you, right?
Yeah. No, it was none of that.
So, you ended up going to Princeton. How do you think, this could be a podcast about a lot of different things. I don't want to spend too much time here. But thinking back at your 4 years at Princeton, you were a standout basketball player. How did Princeton change you? Or how did it impact you? I'll let you define those words.
Yeah. So Princeton did a lot for me. And fortunately, by playing basketball, I had traveled a little bit. So I came all the way from Chicago, Illinois to go to Princeton. The first thing it did was give me the ability to feel confident living away from home and on my own.
This was your first time?
This was my first time.
Even being around like in a non-Black environment, was this your first time? Or?
Well, I went to a Catholic high school.
Oh, so was it diverse, or were you the minority?
We were the minority.
Okay.
It was probably 85% white at my high school. But the first thing that I remember about Princeton was that it was the first time that I moved away, and Raina, it wasn't like it is today where your parents and your grandparents all come with you on the plane and move you in.
Yeah.
You know, my parents put me on a plane, a trunk, a suitcase.
A literal trunk? People had trunks back then?
It was a trunk. Yeah, it was like a big rectangular trunk, the steamer trunk with a padlock on it.
Oh, wow.
And put that on the plane, put my suitcase on the plane, and I had a carry-on bag, and that was all I had. And I came to Princeton for the summer program, which was I
think it's called FSI now.
It's called FSI now, and it was eye-opening for me. But the first impactful thing about Princeton was I felt like I could be on my own at a young age. And I came to Princeton when I had just turned 17.
So you were young for your class.
So I was young for my class, but I felt like this is the kind of place that you can it was safe enough where you felt comfortable being on your own. Then the second thing that was impactful are the relationships I built when I was here. Friends that I had I still have from those days, who are lifelong dear friends and associates, and the network that is Princeton. When I look back on that might be the most important thing that I would say for most people. But there was a third thing for me, especially being Black from the inner city. And I was always a good student, but I wasn't a Princeton student. So I was a good student because I could take tests well. Mm-hmm. I wasn't a studier. What Princeton gave me was an intellectual confidence.
Ooh, I like those two words.
I feel like when I walk into a room or walk into a situation, or I am given a new problem that isn't in sort of the realm of what I'm doing, that if I have enough time and enough information, I can hold my own. And I think that's really important for young Black folks whose parents may not have gone to college, or whose parents have gone to college. But too many times you sort of get pigeonholed into, well, Pell Grant, South Side of Chicago guy, plays basketball. He's okay, but he ain't sharp. And what Princeton helped me realize was that I was sharp enough, and I needed that for the work world in my career that ended up happening after I was done playing.
So after you graduated, you went overseas and played, right, for a few years? Am I getting that right?
I got drafted into the NBA. I went to camp with the Philadelphia 76ers. I got cut, and then I went over and played in the European League in Manchester, England, which was in Great Britain, obviously. And I did that for 2 seasons. And after 2 seasons, I realized, this isn't going to lead me to the NBA. I could probably be starting my career or be doing something more productive, going back to school or something. And I decided to hang up my sneakers and get a job.
How did that moment feel for you?
Hanging up my sneakers? I was somewhat disappointed, but seeing how the business of professional basketball was, I knew, I had a window there. I came closer than a lot of people. I had fun. We had a good team when I played. I had some success. I got to travel around Europe. I got to see a lot, and I was disappointed that I couldn't go to the NBA, but I wasn't devastated by that at all. I was probably more ready than most to move on with my career. And part of that is having had the degree from Princeton that gives you a confidence that, well, I should be able to get a job doing something somewhere.
Were you able to? Because a lot of us now, I remember I was graduating. I had the degree, but it was still hard for me to get a job. I think because I was like anti-finance, anti-consulting. I'm going to do something in media. And it never happened anyway, so I ended up going into the nonprofit world. Right. But was it easy for you back then to make that shift back into corporate?
Well, it's funny that you said you wanted to do something and it was hard to get into. And I found that typically the things that you think you want to do are probably popular to a lot of people, so the demand is higher, so the chances of getting a job is tougher. Mm-hmm. For me, that was advertising. At the time, I wanted to go into the advertising marketing field, and I could not get a job doing that. And then I
could see you as an advertising man.
I could see myself as an advertising man too. I could definitely see myself as an advertising man, but unfortunately, the advertising companies couldn't see me as an advertising man, which I didn't. There were some things that happened that were personal, but I didn't take it personally because that's just the times. Mm-hmm. And one of my really good friends, John Rogers, who is a Princeton grad.
He's Ariel Investments.
Ariel Capital, Ariel Mutual Funds, mm-hmm. Ariel Investments, that John Rogers, who is class of 80 and was the person I stayed with when I came on my recruiting trip to Princeton. So we have been friends since I was 17 years mm-hmm. old. Suggested that I go try and get a job as a stockbroker.
Okay.
And that was the start of my financial career. So I sent my application in and had the round of interviews and ended up working for a company that no longer exists called Dean Witter Reynolds as a stockbroker. And that sort of started my interest in the finance world. And I was a sociology major at Princeton. I took some engineering courses, but no real. So the closest. Well, Princeton doesn't have finance courses, but I took Econ 101 and 102, and that was it, micro and macro. But once I was exposed to it, and again, it gets back to that intellectual confidence. I was like, well, let me try this, and lo and behold, I worked in that industry for like 14 years.
And would you say you were successful?
Oh yeah, but it was hard not to be successful in the 80s. Okay. Let me tell you, that was
the Wolf of Wall Street era.
Oh my gosh. So I started out as a stockbroker, and stockbroker is really you're a salesman. You make cold calls, and it's funny. You'd be in a room full of 10 young brokers at night making cold calls, and you'd be surprised how many people are uncomfortable with calling people up that they don't know.
Were you, though?
I happened to be one of the guys who didn't have a problem with it because I was like, these dudes don't know me.
There's no,
and they give you a script. Oh, I was ready. I was like, oh, man, I just go down the script and sound like I know what I'm talking about, which I can always do. Mm-hmm. But what I found out about the business was that there were two sides. There was the retail side, which are stockbrokers, and you call on individuals. Mm-hmm. And then there was the big-time corporate side, corporate finance, investment banking. Mm-hmm. And when I found out about that, I was like, oh, how's a brother get over there? And what I came to find out, most of the Black guys who were in that had to have MBAs from top schools. Like this wasn't a, University of whatever MBA. This was Harvard, Northwestern, University of Chicago, Penn. Wharton. Mm-hmm. Those were the guys who got those jobs. Stanford. So I went back to school part-time and got my MBA from the University of Chicago, which is now called something else, and it's they're going to kill me because I should know. But I went to the University of Chicago Graduate School of Business, and I chose that school. I got into Harvard, Wharton, Northwestern, and University of Chicago. And the reason why I picked the University of Chicago was because it was the number one quantitative school. Because I knew what they would say is, this guy over here is not quantitative enough. So I wanted to make sure they wouldn't be able to say that by going to University of Chicago. Yes, you can.
As I'm listening to this, would you describe your desire to get ahead as ambition or Like, how would you describe that, right? Because you said something that I picked up on that I think is very interesting. You wanted to know how those people look like you got over there, right?
Yeah, right.
Why was that, I guess, that moment important for you?
Well, there are a couple of things. One is competitiveness, right? Because those were the guys making the really big money, and we were over here. And don't get me wrong, we were making nice money for young guys coming right out of school, coming first-time jobs. But those guys were coming off like the feds, they used to say back in the 80s. And I was just, from a competitive standpoint, I was interested. And then you have to remember, I was from very modest means, and sort of working class Chicago. Mm-hmm. So I didn't pick my vocation for anything other than how much money I could make. And I figured that if I made enough money, that would make things better for me, for my family, for whatever. It's just, poor kid. And it doesn't matter if you're black or white. If you grow up without stuff, you want to see what it's like to have stuff.
And once you got a taste of it too, you're like, okay.
Yeah, that's a different story, because that comes into why I made the switch from finance to basketball. But I was really interested in how the difference between those guys and stockbrokers, because the corporate guys, the investment banking guys, were all viewed differently, and they all acted differently. And so I went back to school and got my MBA, and I ended up being a bond trader, salesman and bond trader, and worked my way up the ladder till I was managing and working. I worked at a smaller firm running the entire fixed income division, and that was that story. And this was the kind of to give you the mindset I had. This was the kind of living where, in my mind, so I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I was thinking, if I can do this till I'm 45 or 50, I can retire and I can teach 7th grade and coach high school basketball, because that was what I wanted to do. That was like
your real thing.
Yes.
So when was the moment, or tell me about the conversation you must have had with yourself that started the decision, or that pushed the domino effect into place that said, all right, this isn't for me. I need to go back to that dream of mine.
So there were a couple of things that were going on at one time. First and foremost, I was married and had 2 young kids, but I was going through a horrible divorce. So I had ended up with this wonderful career, this wonderful family, and it still wasn't working out perfectly. And it was time to make the move from Chicago to New York and start the partnership track stuff. But I couldn't leave my kids behind. And so I moved to a smaller firm, stayed in Chicago, and I was there for a little under 2 years. And serendipitously, my old coach from Princeton University, who was an assistant at Princeton when I was there, Bill Carmody, got the head coaching job at Northwestern University.
Wow.
And he called me up, and we had been friends and I'd helped when he'd come to Chicago and do recruiting. He called me up and said, hey, have you got a minute? And I was congratulating him on getting the job. He said, I want to offer you a job. And I was like, me?
Because he knew that you were in finance.
Everybody knew I was in finance.
Okay.
I mean, no, I was in finance in a big way. Big house, nice car, great vacations. I wanted to make sure everybody knew that I was successful, right? And so he knew it, but he also knew how much I loved the game. My dad wasn't alive when all this was taking place, but I remembered him saying, if you could ever find something that you love and make it your job, it will feel like you're not going to work every day.
And he supported that.
He would have supported it, but he wasn't alive. But he would have supported it. Absolutely. He would have been fine with it. So really, coaching, athletics came back into my life not by me choosing it. It chose me.
maybe it was supposed to happen that way, right? Maybe, you know how they say, whatever you believe in, the universe, whatever, God, maybe there was a reason at that moment that it had to happen.
Well, I tell you what, because there was no way I could move away from my kids. So you might be right. I was just shocked. And then, I talked to him about it for a day, and I went into my partners and said, listen, I'm quitting. Everybody thought I was losing my mind because, as you can imagine, you leave an investment banking job to go be an assistant coach.
That's a pay cut.
It's like more than a pay cut. That's like a life cut. That's a lifestyle cut. But it was I didn't want to make the decision based on money, and I wanted to try out a job that I was excited to do. And I will tell you, this gets back to the intellectual confidence. I always felt like if it didn't work out, I could go back and do something different. But it sort of worked out.
So there was no fear, no doubt, no people saying, what you doing, Craig?
No, there were people saying, what you doing, Craig? And my mom was one of them, and the people I worked with, they were another one. But how it's funny how it played out, because I was very comfortable making the switch, and it was a natural fit, and it felt good, and I was enjoying it, and I got that feeling of how it feels when you do something you love. I was working way more hours than I did when I was in finance, but it didn't feel like it. And the other thing is, when you're in sports, it's a little easier to have your family around you. So it was easy to have my kids at work, and now my current wife, who helped raise my older kids, she could bring them to work, and it was a really good family situation, which helps you feel good about your job too. So no, there were a lot of people who were like, Craig, are you sure? Even Jim Reynolds, who ran the last firm I worked for, Luke Capital, he was like, I'm keeping your seat. I'm not giving it to anybody for a year, so you can in case you want to come back.
He didn't believe. He didn't.
No,
think.
Nobody did. But you have to. My generation is different from yours, Raina. That's the difference. You guys know full on, let me find my groove. I'm looking for my groove. I'm not looking at the money. Okay, we'll worry about that later. You guys try and find happiness. You try and find positive vibes.
But is that good though?
I think it's good. I think it's good.
Let me debate you on that one. Not really debate. Let's talk about this, because it's something that I'm going through, right?
Right.
At this stage, I'm 28 right now. And I graduated 6 years ago. I didn't go the route where I could have made a lot of money fast and then switched.
Right.
I kind of made enough money, saved enough, so that now I'm doing this full time. So I quit my job last year to kind of focus on myself.
Right.
I have a financial safety net. I was smart in that way. But sometimes I wonder, I'm like, is this passion thing really going to pay out? I love what I do, but I always wonder in the back of my head. Like my dad said to me the other day, he was like, Raina, you need to pay into Social Security. Just get a part-time job. I'm like, Dad, please. But you know what I mean? There's a lot. I think our generation is like that, but I think we're also very confused, because with this chasing happiness, with this chasing of our dreams, there's a lot that we're losing as well. There's a lot of stability.
Yeah, if you feel that, I hear you. What I will say is that the dream isn't the same, right? So I think younger people are seeing that their parents have put time in these companies, and what happens? They get laid off. They got nothing. They got laid off. So I think being able to enjoy getting up every day makes you healthier, makes you happier. I think you guys have the potential to be in better relationships. I think that I just think that that's more important than any monetary gain. If there's nothing wrong with having a lot of money, and if that's what you want, go for it. But I think it's wonderful that you are doing this podcast and are doing it to the point where you can do it full time, and you're
still hustling, Craig. Still hustling.
But so everybody is.
Yeah.
That's why it's called work. But you're hustling at something you're enjoying. That's different than if you were hustling at something you didn't like doing. It would feel like drudgery.
When I used to work in the e-commerce marketing field, and when I used to go to work, I literally felt like I was having a heart attack every day. And it was just like, is this going to be the rest of my life? That was that feeling that I used to think. And I actually was forced to quit in a way because my boss knew that it wasn't, I was doing it for a paycheck. And he said, you're still young. Maybe there's something else that you should do. Right. And I was so scared. But the day that I left, I never looked back. I didn't doubt it.
Right. I'm here for the find what you love doing message. Because it's and you said when you look back, are you missing something? Just imagine if you stayed there and you didn't do the podcast, you'd be looking back thinking what that would have been like. So to me, even if you just try something just to see what it would be like, even if you can't keep with it, you know what that feeling's like, and you can always come back to it.
So what were the challenges during this shift for you? Because I'm pretty sure things couldn't have been easy, smooth sailing. What were some of the hurdles that you had to face, and how did you work through them?
Well, outside of the sort of obvious financial cutbacks, it was kind of relearning a new industry as an adult, right? So
because at this point you were like in your early 40s?
I was in my mid to late 30s when I switched. So, as I got into my early 40s, I'm an assistant basketball coach learning a whole new business. And that was a real challenge. Because times had changed from the time that I played. So the game was a little bit different too. So I had to relearn a lot of stuff. That was a challenge. That was pretty much the only challenge. The rest of it, whatever the challenges were, don't stick in my mind. I'm sure I had them on a day-to-day basis, but it was fun figuring things out, and it was fun developing relationships with the players, and it was fun out recruiting, and it was fun competing again. There was this real sort of insecurity about trying something new as an adult, because most people who did that weren't getting back into the workforce, and I was just very fortunate that I was able to do that.
Did you have any criticism during this time of how you were doing at your job? Because I think a lot of people who make transitions, right, it's always like, do you belong here? Did people question if you belonged? And if so, how did you navigate that personally?
Raina, that's a really good question, and I know that people always say that's a really good question, but I do it especially because I do enough of these where I don't get asked. I get asked the same questions all the time. I've never been asked that question. So yes, the answer is yes, because like anything that's competitive, there's sort of a zero-sum game. There's only there's let me get this right. There is a finite number of Division I basketball jobs, and there's 360 of them. So that means there's 360 times 3 assistant coaches. Okay,
and were the schools you're playing at Division I?
They were all. I was at Division I. I was at Northwestern University in Chicago, Illinois.
I'm basketball illiterate.
No, that's okay. That's all right. They're in the Big Ten.
Okay.
So I leapfrogged a lot of dudes and got in Division I as an assistant coach.
Oh, okay. Now I'm.
So now you see where I'm going.
Yeah.
I totally get it, because if I were one of those guys who got leapfrogged, I might have been a little resentful too. So there were some times where people were like, "Man, how does dude get in here just like that?" And but it wasn't anything that was going to deter me from getting into coaching. As a matter of fact, I think the real question that I had for Coach Carmody when I was thinking about making the transition was whether or not he thought starting this late I could become a head coach at some point.
Was that the goal then, once you made the shift?
Well, once I figured it out, because I'm telling you, the first 2-3 years was like drinking from a fire hose. I was learning so much, there was no time to think about getting another job. But he said to me, he was like, listen, it has everything to do with how you do. If you win, you do a good enough job, and the timing's right, you could be a head coach. But I was thinking, oh, that's okay, because I could be a head coach at a lower level, like Division III or something. I knew I wanted to teach, right? So I was not deterred at all. But there was some criticism. But like anything else, you come back to your foundation. You know, I can read, I can write, I can think. I should be able to be pretty good. What was really amazing about the job, was developing new friendships and relationships with people who were much younger than I was. That was one of the wonderful byproducts of becoming a coach.
How did you maintain this belief in yourself? Because I think something that I often don't understand, I don't understand, but I have yet to experience. I sometimes think in my head, people who are younger don't believe in themselves, but as you get older, the belief will increase, right? Is that true? Or did you have to have some kind of practice that really made sure that you were instilling that belief in yourself and telling yourself, hey, I can do it?
Well, not consciously.
Okay.
Not consciously. But I will tell you that I was well trained. Fraser and Marion Robinson trained us well on self-confidence.
Okay.
And the big thing in our house was, if you ever came into our house and you said, so-and-so said this, or I did this because so-and-so said that, that was the time you got in trouble.
They didn't want to hear that.
Oh, my Lord. I can see my mom's face right now when I say, hey, so-and-so said this. She'd be like, why do you care what they say? And my mom and dad were both very happy, wonderful people. But you didn't come correct on the self-esteem part. They were like, what? What is the matter with you? And so I was grounded in, I can't be worried about what other people are thinking. So that right there, subconsciously, that was sort of what I fell back on. And the other thing is, Raina, like you said, when you feel like as you get older, you get more confidence. Absolutely, because you have more experiences. And once you realize that the things that you're going through ain't the first time somebody went through. That's one thing these young folks think. There's like, oh, the world's coming to an end because nobody has lost a significant other like I did. My heart, nobody's had their heart broken like mine. Nobody's gotten fired like I have. And it is. And you just have to bounce back. And again, it goes back to being, I think if you're intellectually confident, it helps you to be emotionally confident, at least for me. But I grew up emotionally confident too. You know, I can't.
You're really blessed for that, because a lot of people struggle with that. And
yes.
I don't think our parents consciously do it, because they may not have had the resources. So maybe your parents had parents who were very, who knew how to raise them in that way.
So I talked to my mom about this because, my dad wasn't around when we had kids. So as I started having children, and I asked my mom, I was like, how did you do that? How did you know to do that? And you know what she said? She said, I saw the stuff that my parents did that I didn't like, and I said I wasn't going to do that.
Yep.
It's just common sense sometimes, but it has to be intentional, and it has to be unyielding. Like, as a, I know I'm getting off the track here with the parenting thing.
No, it's okay.
But
everything's on track.
With the thing about my mom and dad, and I try and do it as a parent, my wife Kelly and I try and do it as parents, is you have to be relentless. You cannot let kids outlast you. And I see it a lot of times when in coaching, where you can see a kid who outlasted his parents because he's doing what he wants to do, and the parents can't get him to stop. My parents never went for that.
Mine either.
I go 99 times I want that. They go 100 times no, and then I finally quit.
And it also helps you. I think about the lessons. Maybe we can talk about this. I know in your book, A Game of Character, is really a lot of it's based upon the lessons that your parents taught you. My parents, the one lesson that I just stands out in my mind is budgeting. Because when we were younger, I don't know if you remember, cable used to be like, it wasn't how it was. You had to kind of choose what you wanted.
Right. And it was expensive, way more expensive.
And Cartoon Network was an add-on. So you could have Nickelodeon was the basic, and Cartoon Network and Disney Channel were the add-ons.
Right.
The people who are listening to the podcast, they know the story, but I'll tell you. And my dad was like, all right, you want Cartoon Network? Well, that's $4 out your allowance. And so I had to make at a very young age this decision. Did I want to have $10 allowance or did I want to have $6 allowance?
Right.
And you know what I chose? The $10.
Of course.
And I think that ability to distinguish between a need versus a want was something that has carried me on through my life. So what are some lessons that your parents taught you that also stand out to you?
Well, I wrote about in a game of character how I learned the financial lesson in our house. You know, I came home one day from school, once again listening to some kid who asked me, "Are you all rich?" And I thought for a minute, and I was like, "No, I don't think so." But I went home and had the nerve to ask my parents, "Are we rich?" And my parents looked at each other and they said, "What do you think?" I was like, "Well, we have dinner every night. We get to do stuff as a family. We get clothes to wear. Every now and then we eat out. By golly, we are rich." And my dad said, "Well, you know what? When I get paid, I'm going to show you how rich we are." He gets paid, and he gets his whole check paid in cash. And he laid it out on the bed.
How old were you?
Oh, 9, 10. I wasn't 12. I know that. It was early. It was early on. I was in elementary school. And I said, "We are rich," when I saw the money on the bed. And he's like, wait a minute. He's like, "Got to pay rent. You have to have a place to live." And he said, "Okay, the rent is this much." And he counted out that much and he put it in a pile over there. And I was like, wow, okay. So that's a lot of money left over. He's like, no. You know that car out there that gets us back and forth to work? You have to pay that every month. I was like, really? You have to pay for that every month? He's like, oh, yeah. And he took some more money out. And he kept doing that with all the bills, electric bill, water bill. We didn't have cable back then, so there wasn't no cable bill. But he finally gets down to our allowance. $1 for Mish and $1 for me. And at the end, he's like, "Oh, and report card day or Fridays, report card day, pizza, got to take out for that." Oh, but here was the thing. I skipped a part. The first thing he took out was how much he wanted to put in savings. So he paid him. So he's like, "Pay yourself first." So I'm putting X amount in savings. So by the end, he said, "Okay, what do we have left?" I was like, "Man, we got $20 left. That's pretty good." He's like, "What about gas for the car?" That's like $10 a week. And so he's like, "Now, $10 has got to last us for 2 weeks." And that was when I realized that we were not rich, that we were very close to not having enough money. And it was one of those lessons that was very basic, but it was very powerful.
Yeah, and you remember it now.
Oh, I can't wait till so we have a 9-year-old and 7-year-old. I cannot wait for them to ask me something crazy so I can do the same thing, because it's just one of those things.
It might be a little bit different, though.
No. You know, as a parent, you make it work out in your favor to get the point across. But yeah, it would be a little different.
But there's so many things that I think parents, like now, I'm not a parent, but there's so many sacrifices, right? And those sacrifices are things that you always remember. And as you get older, you appreciate more. Right. Is there anything else, or is there a saying that you remember from your parents that stands out? One that stands out in my head is it's a Jamaican saying. I have a horrible fake Jamaican accent. Okay. But it's like, you can bring a donkey to the water, but you can't make him drink. Yeah. And it basically means like, you can't make people change.
Right.
They would have to, you can't do things for people. You can teach them how to do it, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to want to do it. So that's just something that my parents always told me, especially when it comes to friends, relationships. Like, listen, at the end of the day, you have no control over what other people do. You can only really influence them. Well,
my dad had this saying that has nothing to do with anything other than because, you know, I mean, he made it by on a very modest income and didn't go to college. And in his sort of want for us to strive and thrive, he said, you know, I like fatback, and you know what fatback is? It's like the cheapest cut of meat from a pig that you would put in greens to give it flavor.
To get the flavor?
Right.
Okay.
He said, I've had fatback and I've had filet mignon. I like them both. I like the filet mignon better. And his thing was, it's okay to try and strive for the stuff that you don't have. And I always thought that was so silly of a statement until I got old enough and I realized what he was saying.
I'm thinking about that now, too. Like, sometimes you need to know that both exist, too.
Because we didn't know. Because I hadn't had filet mignon. So it was like his way of sort of saying, hey, it's okay to pass us up here, you know, or leave us behind. You know?
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think as like black Princeton graduates, there's that big conundrum of who are you leaving behind when you get to the Ivy League, when you go beyond the Ivy League, when you have these big dreams. How did you manage that in your own life? Or how can other people who are going through that challenge right now navigate that? Because it's hard. When you want to be successful, when you have these big ideas, there may be people that cannot come along, but maybe they're just not supposed to. I don't know.
You know, that is a hard one. Just like you learn the value of a dollar, budgeting, like you said, you have to understand you got to budget your life too, right? You can't give up so much that you don't have enough to sustain yourself. And that's one of those things that, and I see it a lot with professional athletes. There's this, we made it when one guy has made it. The whole neighborhood feels like they made it. And that's okay. You just can't pay for everybody. You can't pay for everybody.
What if you feel like you have to, though?
You can't. You got to be strong enough to say no. And that brings that brings up that old saying. It's better to, instead of giving a guy fish, it's better to teach him how to fish. And I think we as a community need to really heed that. And it's better holistically for the other folks too. But I get it. It's tough, and once you make it and you can be more philanthropic, then you be more philanthropic.
So Craig, although you got back into the sports world, you're working for the NBA now, you still kind of have a little bit of this business in you, right? This entrepreneurial spirit. Tell me a little bit about Vooks and what you're doing in Chicago.
Well, I was fortunate enough to partner up with some folks who are really passionate about making literacy or bringing literacy to folks who don't necessarily have the same opportunities. And what Vooks is a video book streaming company where you can go online and it has read along text and stories with illustrations that are moving. And I was fortunate enough to get involved with them, and I've always been passionate about education, and I've always thought that one of the things that's given me a sort of leg up is the fact that I started reading at an early age. And there are a lot of kids who probably could read at an early age, but just don't have the resources to do.
Did you enjoy it? Because I know people.
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Good. I was
Absolutely.
like that as well.
But once again, this was my parents. I just asked them, how do you read? And I was 4, and they were like, well, we'll show you how to read. And my mom spent the whole day showing me, and at the end of the day, I could read. And then I didn't stop reading until it got to be like college, where you're just reading textbooks. But I always thought that would be a nice way to give back and maybe do something entrepreneurial and turn a profit.
Was this your first entrepreneurial
leap? No.
You did Loop Capital at some
not Loop. I did an investment management firm a la John Rogers back when I was really young, when I first stopped playing. And then I was part owner of a bicycle helmet company.
Okay.
Yeah. Manufacturing company. And then now Vooks is an opportunity to really do something and do some good at the same time.
Yeah. What has been the biggest lesson you've learned now in this space? About what it takes to succeed in the 21st century in the, I guess, social entrepreneurship world, right?
I think, when you get past the hard work stuff and you get past the doing things right, I think there's a couple of things. You have to develop a really good culture so that people want to work with you, because you need that before they'll start seeing your vision and executing your vision. So you have to be able to connect with people in a real positive way. And I just think that it's so hard to find good people, that you have to be able to connect with the ones that when you have them, you have to connect with them. Then I think because we are now growing up in an age where a lot of these young folks aren't face-to-face communicating anymore, you have to be able to communicate. And I have to be able to communicate the way you take in communication. So I can't just expect you, Raina, being young, to be able to sit across from me on a table and sell me something. I have to understand that I have to be as adept in social media and the different ways that you guys
the new age stuff, right?
The new age interaction. I mean, that I think is it's really important, and it's the lifeblood of your business. And then one other thing that comes to mind that I just picked 3 things because I knew you were going to ask me about 3 things, but and these may change for different people, but for me, the third thing is being adaptable. Being adaptable. I think as a leader, as sort of a culture builder, as a partner, you want to be adaptable because times are changing quickly, and what's in now is out tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you can't be that old guy on the rocking chair on the porch saying it was better way back when. It's like, okay, it was good back then too, but this ain't too bad either. And these young folks have some really good ideas, and you have to be sort of adaptable and collaborative at the same time.
So thank you for sharing those, Craig.
Sure.
I have a question that I haven't asked anyone.
Oh, wow.
In this context, in this specific way, what's the lesson that took you the longest to learn?
Now, is this the most surprising lesson or the hardest lesson?
Whichever one you have the answer to. Whichever one you want to answer.
Well,
we could do both, surprising or hardest.
The hardest lesson it's taken me the longest to learn is that, unlike me, who was raised in a certain kind of family and played sports, that people do what's in their best interest first and what's in the team's interest next. Whereas I'm a person who is raised to do what the team needs, and then hopefully I'll get what I need out of that. That has taken me a long, hard way to get to. But it's human nature. And once I accepted it, I was like, okay, now I know how to manage that, right? I know how to manage people who have that sort of way about them. The most surprising lesson that I've learned over the years, and this is really important for people to hear, young people who are going into college, is that when was the last time you talked about a subject that you took when you were in college? It's a long time, right?
Yeah.
It has. What you learn in undergrad has nothing to do with what you're going to end up doing.
Yeah. I was sociology, so I'm always looking at people and things, but a lot of the other classes, I'm like, when will I ever use any of this stuff?
But it helps you get to where you are.
Yeah.
It builds a foundation. You develop relationships. It's really important, but it's one of those things that's important that you don't see in the end result very often, but it's there.
So you're saying respect the journey, or what's the...
Absolutely. You can put it that way. Respect the journey, and don't be disappointed if the journey has nothing to do with what you majored in. Don't be disappointed, because it probably isn't.
Do you still think college is worth it for people? Wow,
that's a really good question. I do. I think it needs to be more affordable.
Yeah.
But I think it is life-changing.
Just walking from the train over to the library today, I'm just like, wow, this was my life for 4 years, and every building had a memory, and it's just... Princeton has really, I'm so grateful they gave me financial aid.
Yeah, right. Same here. And I feel, which is, I'm class of 83.
Class 2013.
And I'm a parent of a graduate. Leslie Robinson graduated 2 years ago, class of 2018. And now I am a trustee. And it is just, it's mind-boggling that I'm in the place that I am and almost didn't come here. So I'm very thankful for financial aid as well.
Shout out. And winding down, Craig, is there ever a time when you feel like giving up? Because, if so, how do you get out of it? Because I would say don't give up, but what do you tell yourself?
Well, first of all, this again comes back to that point of finding something you love doing, because you never feel like quitting. That's one thing when, we won 17 games last year. I didn't feel like quitting. I was just trying to figure out how to win more games this year.
That's bad, right?
Yeah, that's bad. It was bad. It was a tough season, but we have a very young team.
Okay.
We had a very young team, but I never feel like quitting. But there have been other things that made me feel like quitting, and I first think about my family. Can't quit on them. I've got 4 kids. I got a wife at home. I can't quit on them. My mom's still alive. My dad would be so disappointed if I gave up. So I think family and friends is the second thing. So you just I never feel like giving up. Family and friends. Oh, and the third thing is, if you're feeling down, 2 things: get more sleep and exercise.
And that can be an instant pick-me-up?
That will be a pick-me-up. For me, exercise is a pick-me-up. And when I'm feeling sort of sluggish, I'm usually tired. I'm like a baby. Like, I'm cranky when I'm tired. I should take a nap.
Yeah.
And when I exercise, you get those endorphins flowing. And
confidence. I think exercise is even if you do it for 10 minutes,
yes,
it's just like this daily confidence. I did it. I said I'm going to do it. I accomplished something.
Right.
And plus your body's chemically reacting as well. I agree with you on that.
So I'm a little bit of a cheat on that one because I'm enjoying my life. I'm enjoying my family. I'm enjoying my job. I'm enjoying being here with you. So I rarely feel like quitting. And when I do, I just take a nap and then I feel better.
I need to have you in my back pocket all day to just be like, Craig, give me some advice, right? Okay, so Craig, this is a bonus question because I couldn't have an interview with you without asking you something about your sister.
Oh,
it's
sure.
It's going to be in a different way. So you are the older brother of the iconic, as you said, Michelle Obama. How do you think, we can be great support systems for those in our lives, right? Because a lot of us, you love your younger sister, right? What goes into being a good older brother, or how can we really support those that we love?
The best way to support, this is an easy one because, I live it every day with my whole family, but with my sister particularly. And, when she was in the White House and my brother-in-law was in the White House and they were, struggling along and people are writing this and saying that, what you have to be is you have to be like my parents are, unconditionally supportive, unconditional love, no judgment. Let them be mad if they want to be mad because, when you're people who are in such a high position and visible position, people don't expect Michelle Obama and Barack Obama to have a bad day. And I always felt my job was to help them get through their tough times. So I would say be supportive, don't be judgmental, unconditional love.
So close your eyes, Craig.
Okay.
You are on the journey. This is your dream driving journey, right? You're going up the road. What do you want the ending credits on your movie to be?
That selfishly, I would love for the Knicks to win a world championship since I work for the Knicks. But more spiritually, I mentioned to you early on, I've got still young kids. So, and I have a 27-year-old son and a 23-year-old daughter and 9 and 7. I want their lives to be as fulfilling, if not more fulfilling than mine.
That's that legacy, right?
That's that word legacy, which I didn't know when I went to Princeton, and I know very well now. I professionally, I'm doing what I love doing. I would love to do it a little bit better, but there are 30 of these teams in the whole world, right? So I'm one of the 30. So even if I'm the 30th, I'm all right. But I want to keep growing professionally, and I want to keep learning. That's the one thing. If I could get people, I think that's what keeps people alive. I think as you get older, as long as you're learning and your mind is interested, and you can get up and go to work even if you're not getting paid for it. If you have a purpose, it makes you feel good. It makes you live longer. So I want to just keep learning.
Okay, and then last question. What does being a dream driver mean to you?
Being a dream driver means that we all have to be inspirational for each other because not everybody's dream happens at the same time, and not everybody's drive is the same. So while we're trying to drive to our dream, we have to be willing to help each other get there. It's a team. Life is a team sport, right? Yep. And as soon as we get everybody thinking like that, we'll be in a much better position than we are now.
Thank you so much, Craig. This has been amazing. And Dream Drivers, I hope you enjoyed listening to Craig's story.
My pleasure.
All right, so that's a wrap for episode 221 with Craig Robinson. I hope you enjoyed hearing his dream driving journey as well as his keys to success. If you love this episode, you know what you need to do. Please share this with somebody. You can share by tagging us on Instagram stories, posting to your Instagram page, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you are. You can even text it or email it to somebody. The best way that you can help grow the community is to pass along the knowledge, pass along the information, help inspire, help motivate somebody else who needs to hear the wisdom that Craig shared today. If you want to join our weekly newsletter, The Keys, and get weekly updates from me personally, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/join. That's dreamsanddrive.com/join. And if you want to find ways that you can support Dreams and Drive monetarily, Just go to dreamsanddrive.com/donate. That's dreamsanddrive.com/donate. I often get questions about how you guys can support, and that's the best way if you want to just have a one look at all the different options there are. Before we end out the day today, I want to kind of reflect on something that happened last week. As you guys know, I was the event producer for Nikhila Matthews-Okome's first live show, Side Hustle Pro Live. And that happened October 9th. And I'm telling you guys, I am still on a high from that event. I want to do maybe a longer episode on this, but the biggest thing I learned is that there are no limits. Once you get past fear, once you get past doubt, you can surprise yourself about all that you can accomplish. When Nikhila reached out to me in June, I, told her I've never done a live podcast before. She said, but you've done events. You can do this. She said she wants to hire me. And you know what? Something within me said, you know what, Raina, just take a chance. Just try it. See what happens. And the event turned out to be a huge, huge success. So I just want to give encouragement to anybody out there who's kind of like teetering on the cliff of their dreams. Sometimes you really have to just take a leap and build your wings on the way down. A quote that I love. I still love this quote from episode 20 guest, Lori Swink. So I'll definitely tell you guys more about that whole event planning process and how we were able to make Nikhila's vision come to life. But I'm so proud of myself. And I think sometimes we don't, acknowledge that. It's great to be proud of yourself. It's great to look at yourself and say, girl, you did that, or whatever. You did that, right? We all need those moments, and we all need to push ourselves, and we all need those support systems that will see in us things that we can't always see in ourselves at first. Make sure that you're subscribed to Dreams and Drive. So wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, wherever, hit that subscribe button so that you get notifications every time we have a new episode. And if you're listening specifically on Apple Podcasts and you love this episode with Craig, please go into the app and leave a rating and review. Those help us so much you wouldn't even know. As always, guys, keep dreaming, keep driving, and listen, don't forget to pitch. I am back into the full swing of trying to get new guests on the show. So if you know somebody, or if you are somebody who'd be great fit for the show, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/pitch and fill out the form there. All right. Bye, guys.